we can start. Welcome back to another masterclass of the second day of the Italian Tech Week 2025. This masterclass, as all the others one that you have attended yesterday, you are attending tomorrow and may attend today and tomorrow, are offered by the Italian Tech Academy, which is a spin-off of the Italian Tech Week in cooperation with Talent Garden. We are a digital skills academy specialized in training coursing about AI, digital skills, innovation. And talking about innovation, a very important topic is mobility design and the future of mobility. And today we have the pleasure to have here guests, two speakers from the European Institute of Design, Wouter Haspeslagh and Lowie Vermeersch, and sorry for the pronunciation. And I give the stage to you, and welcome.
Thank you. Hello. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking out time to listen to our masterclass or presentation. I'm Lowie Vermeersch. Together with Wouter Haspeslagh, we coordinate Master of Transdisciplinary Mobility Design at IED. And today, together, we'll do it in two parts. We would like to open a bit to look towards tomorrow, where we believe that mobility design, which is our field in which we work, really has to go beyond thinking of the vehicle. We're here in Turin, one of the capitals of automotive design. We work with IED and also Granstudio, our design agency, to really, starting from the heritage, to pull it open and go beyond just the vehicle, and really venture in the full field of mobility design, which is for us a very open field. You want to give a quick introduction of yourself, Wouter?
No, I think what I just want to say, it's a masterclass, so let's keep it as a class. If you want to ask a question during presentation already, just raise your hand. Just let's treat it as a classroom, and I think it will work out. Cool, enjoy.
Good. Today we would like to share with you, we see two mindsets that we really believe that need to shift, starting from that point where Turin was really rooted in before. I will illustrate first what we believe really is a needed shift into how we design vehicles, going beyond cars and so on. And then Wouter will take it from there to put it even further open, how we really need to go beyond the vehicles. So we'll start really whereas today, and we'll end up in a much broader spectrum in the future. What I will show is a mix of elements that we work with in our design agency, and so of course we use and apply within IED. Also a good example of this exchange between the professional and the educational side. So the first shift that we need to have is to make sure that when we design mobility, and I will start with designing the vehicles, that we really have experience-driven workflows. It might sound an open door for many of you, but the whole mobility transportation design world comes from a strong connection to designing the object. And this really needs to shift to designing the experience. Now, these are the classical sketches that you will see from vehicle design, which translated into virtual models, and we build physical models to evaluate the design and look at it, look if it's beautiful enough, look if it's what we want, to eventually then translate into cars like this one, but it could be any kind of car, any kind of vehicle. But today that's no longer sufficient. So this kind of really physical object related approach to design is really no longer sufficient, because the experience that we have in vehicles is influenced, yes, still a lot about the physical part of it, but also very much about everything that happens on the digital layer, which is not just a touchscreen, but maybe also it's the way my seat moves when a car comes near, the way my car behaves, the character of my autonomous driving. So the spectrum of the elements that together generate the experience I have is much broader than it was before. And to be able to design that experience, as a consequence, means that just these physical objects are no longer a sufficient tool to design these experiences. I think we can compare it a bit to what happens in, for example, handheld devices. I think many of you recognize the Nokia phone, which at a certain point was like the standard phone. And almost everybody had a phone like this or a similar phone. Now, I went to look into the archive of Nokia to see how they were imagining the future of this phone in that moment. And these are some of the proposals I have found. So what you can see is that they were really working hard to find new shapes that give this futuristic feeling, that hint at the future. But of course, by now we all know what happens. The real new Nokia phone was not Nokia itself, but what Apple did with the iPhone, and many more than just Apple. What's the lesson here is that Nokia didn't manage to see that it was no longer just about the shape or how we put the buttons and so on. It was about something much broader, much more. And this is the lesson that Apple had, of course, to design the experience. The shape in itself is actually boring, but it doesn't matter because the shape enables a much more rewarding, complete experience. And it's just not just this object, it's also the whole app store that sits behind and much more. So it becomes a whole system, ecosystem. Now, if you translate that back to design, so what we teach and believe in is that in a similar way, we really need to watch out that we don't get stuck in that same tunnel vision. It's not just about physical design anymore, and so we can still make physical models, but we also need to look at the digital design part. And of course, there's great software programs, there are VR glasses and so on. But vehicles have something very specific. Vehicles remain always also a very physical experience. The way we sit in it, the way we touch, the way we hit our head or we don't hit our head, for example, in a car. But also in a bus, the way it vibrates, how I can look outside. In a train, how far I am from the other people, how can I communicate. It's a very physical experience. That means that mobility design can't just shift to digital tools. What we need is a combination of them. And what we in our agency have been developing is this tool called Digify, which is really uniting the physical world and the digital world. And this we use working with IED. So with IED we develop projects on this tool to make sure that the new generation of designers at IED really is learning how in the future you need to design, and I'll make sure that they get that right mindset to be prepared for the future. Here's a short movie of what that tool is to get a little bit of grasp. It would be too long to totally explain it, but the core here is to create a mixed reality environment. So for me, the future design environment of a designer, whether it's for a vehicle or an object, is a mixed reality environment where we literally blend the physical and the digital. So we put the designer in the position to freely, agile, lean, create complete experiences. So experience first. So you design what is that I want to feel, and then you have this freedom to experiment that feeling. Can I reach it by doing something at the interaction level, or even at the surface level, or at the physical level? So that is a very important change, and change also in mindset. So what you see here is that how blending physical and digital allows you to completely experience the car, but you don't build it anymore. But it also means that you're not stuck so much on that physical object, so you shift your mind. I'll quickly show this. So this is an example of a project that we've been doing with IED. So this is the kind of prototypes that we make together, where students can experience the full thing And so you see some physical parts, but a lot of digital too. And that is, I think, the design environment of the future. So it's blending the physical part, the digital, and doing it in a very lean way. And this is not just about vehicles. This, for example, a project we've been working on to design a new fridge. It's just a box, just like a phone is just a soap bar kind of thing. The whole experience is done by when you open what happens, the magic when you come with a Nutella pot and the different levels are opening up because the fridge understands what you want to do. That is where the experience sits, and that is what we need to design as designers, and we need, of course, the tools to do that. So that's also why that same approach, we do it beyond automotive and so on. So to conclude with this first shift, this mindset shift that we need is where in the past, and automotive mobility was very much styling driven. It was about the aesthetics, the beauty, and so on. So it was very much about the visual appearance. We need to shift that to, in the future, but actually already today, in the user experience driven process, which is already long going in other fields. So it's still very important, the visual appearance. Especially a vehicle is always a little bit an avatar. I show myself in the public space through my vehicle, whether it's a public vehicle or a private vehicle. But the function, the interaction, the technology, all these aspects that we added, add to it. It's like we were cooking before with almost one ingredient. Now we have the pleasure of cooking of many, many, many more ingredients. And that, of course, means a shift in a process which originally was really based on looking at the design. Now we need to make decisions through the process, and as much as possible, as iterative as possible, as lean as possible, by experiencing the design. And this is what we do together with IED. So allow designers to understand how this new process and provide them with the tools to actually work this way and actually experience the design. So to translate that bit in a process, and this bridges to the part of Wouter, what it means is that we believe that in a process, in a project, so we should not look if here we have the reality that we all know, when we go towards the future. We should not just go from one object, imagine there's a car here, and then try to imagine the next car. What we actually need to do is a mental jump into the pure field of ideation, vision, intuition also. And there understand what is it that we desire in the future. It's not about predicting the future, it's about what do we desire in the future. And then the core element is based on that define what is it that we want to create for people, what is meaningful for them to experience. And that then becomes the guiding line. That becomes the red line that you follow. And then with tools like the one I have shown, which allow to do very fast and multiple iterations, allow you to check that experience, go back and forth, refine it to eventually translate something in something which is really real. And what if you do this well, what normally will happen is that with a process like that, you arrive just a little bit farther than what you would do if you just extrapolate the past. That's the difference for me between an iPhone and those concepts we have seen of Nokia. And that, I think, bridges a bit to the second mindset shift that we need. Because until now, I've been quite speaking about cars, phones, fridges, stuff we kind of know. Stuff which are there already, that we do need to design in a different way with different tools. But of course, that's only a tiny part of what we need to really address the challenges, but also the pleasures of the mobility of the future. And that is something that Wouter will illustrate you, and I'll take you far beyond those objects that we already know.
Okay. To go beyond, actually, we need to start with going back. And I want to start with this picture. This picture has been taken about 125 years ago, Italy, Naples. And what is interesting in this picture is that it was still the city as the city had always been so far. Public space was domestic space, was commercial space, was political space. All of these different uses of the city were represented within the city itself. And the means of transport that were available at the time were actually evolving also over time, but for many, many, many decades, many centuries, it was basically just walking and maybe horses. At a certain point, what happened? Freedom. My personal freedom. There was the car. And it was actually a pretty damn good solution that was responding to the request of a lot of different people. And it was very good in responding to the request of a lot of different people. It actually provided liberty to a certain point, because this was the result. So suddenly what happens with the city is that all these different uses, they have been mainly reduced to traffic space. Traffic space historically only existed in between the cities. The traffic road would stop when you would enter the city. Now traffic had entered the city, and basically we lost a lot of different aspects that made the city worth living in. But it's not just taking place in the city, it's not just occupying space. Of course, I said before, city and how vehicles are used, they interfere with each other. So we started to build our cities around the means of transportation that we desperately wanted to use. We had a car, let's use it. And you end up in a lot of very strange situations. And of course we continue to use the car, but it's a very difficult relationship. We need to have a lot of different rules to actually make it work, and to try to make it fit in our daily lives, and have the context or the city that we live in correspond to what we actually desire. So in a nutshell, this is nothing else than user-centered mobility design. So it all started with the desire of being mobile, so the small arrows that you can see here, the desire for a certain user experience. Around it was designed a solution, in this case a car, and that solution again was defining the context in which it was. So meaning that the city eventually was also changing because of the design of the car. What we propose, though, is something that does not have a lot of these negative consequences. And so it is this user-centered but context-aware mobility design, in which, yes, of course it is still very relevant to give attention to future desired user experience, but it is also very relevant to give attention to the context in which this is going to happen. And the result is that, of course, these arrows here now, they are flipped. And the result of this all is not that we are going to change the context, no. We're going to change the design. And the interesting thing here is that technology, we're at Tech Week, so let's say something about technology as well. Technology, in a lot of cases, allows us to set the balance very, very precisely and make this line as precise as possible to form the ideal balance between the user experience and what we require for the context. So, of course, the result of that is that in different contexts, people have different expectations. There are different things that we need to do. Inside the city is not the same as outside the city. A pedestrian area is not the same as a highway. So the resulting type of vehicle that is useful there, of course, differs drastically. And so this is the basics of where we go with user-centered and context-aware mobility design. So we have been working quite a lot on vision projects that are more on the urban level. So working together with great urbanist architects, cities asking us, hey, can we compile a team together and let's put down a vision for the future of this city in the year 2050, for example. Very interesting because it allows you to also mentally break away from all the conditions that we consider as restraints in this very moment. But at the same time, it also allowed us to think beyond, and so to imagine what could happen there. How do we actually want to live these places? 2050 is still, well, quite a few years ahead, so we can imagine that the spaces that we actually live in, we can also design them. We can imagine what they should represent for us. And so, for example, we have all witnessed over the last decade, even in Turin, the arrival of pedestrian areas. Super nice. A lot of benefits. How can we make them bigger? How can we make them maybe even beyond the walkable? And we started to experiment. And here, this is a vehicle, but it's not a vehicle. It's an object as well. So here, for example, first, very playful experiments with a bench that has autonomous technology in there. And it can be parked around a tree and be just a bench. And then maybe in a couple of days a week, when the street is closed off for the traffic, it just hovers around and it goes to the middle of the street and it creates a square. It breaks with the immense scale of the car infrastructure that had been. So again, Italy, but this is an example that actually resulted from what I've just shown. So we started to think about these type of objects, and we started to call them mobile objects, or mobjects in short. And so this is an example of it. And so it is intended to be used in pedestrian areas and to make the stretch, or to attract also people that maybe have problems walking that far, or maybe they have to carry something, or maybe it's raining and you don't want to walk. So what you see here is something that needs to operate in a space that is for pedestrians. So we do not need fast things. We want to operate at pedestrian paces. That means that this is a vehicle that goes between walking and running, let's say between 5 and 15 kilometers an hour. So that means that aerodynamics, we can throw overboard. It's not important anymore. We can actually create something that resembles much more the architecture in which it is fitted. And so that also means that the result of it is that it does not feel as an intruder in the space like a car would do. To think about how people would actually want to use it, if you need to have a ticketing system and a booking system, no, it's impossible. So we wanted this for people to be free to use. So it has a screen, it's an autonomous vehicle, so it moves around. So it has a lot of technology on board that allows it to know where it is precisely. So in that case, we wanted to use the same technology for dynamic publicity. And so the dynamic publicity actually allows that people can use it for free and just hop on and hop off. But at the same time, even if it's not in use, even if it's just standing there, it is still contributing to the space in a positive way. It is still a pavilion, it is still a billboard, it is still a Wi-Fi hotspot. You can still sit in it. It's a shelter from the rain as well. So that is very different than what a car does when it's being parked outside of a building. So again, here technology, yes, technology is very important, but technology here is embedded. It's not about the sake of technology. It's about what it actually can bring us. It's about what it means for the user and what it can do for the context. So again, setting this balance right. So in this case, yes, it has solar panels. It's completely autonomous. You don't have to charge it. It can run for at least 8 hours a day without ever having to plug it in, and so on and so on. So that is all contributing. So what it looks like in the end, and this is just a very fast visualization that we did a couple of years here in Turin, is this. And what you see here is a very intuitive use of a vehicle. And there's something that I always like to refer to, which is we try to set the game without defining its rules. So we offer this type of mobility. If you want to use it, you can use it. It's not that you have to use it. A lot of people would prefer to walk, and that's completely fine, because pedestrian areas are there to walk. Okay, so what is actually happening there, and what allowed us to do this, is also thanks to the technology, as I said before, and is something that we see happening more and more in different areas of mobility or vehicle design. So what you see here are three classic ways of categorizing mobility. You go on foot, you go on bicycle, and you go on the car. Maybe there's public transport as well. But the interesting thing is not per se what is happening with these vehicles, but what is happening in between and how they start to grow towards each other. So of course this we all started to see quite some years ago now with micromobility, with the shared scooters in the city and so on. But also a lot is happening between the bicycle and the car. Think of the Citroën Ami, for example, in this very moment. So, and this is just an example of how different categories are growing towards each other. But of course it is also happening between public transport, individual, private, public. So they're all things that get to be mixed up more and more and to create much more interesting types of mobility. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So this one is an example, and the context here, context is important, is London. And in London, there is a legislation in certain areas of the city. There is a maximum amount of parking spots that a real estate developer can build per apartment. And in this case, it was 1 parking per 10 luxury apartments. The real estate developer, well, scratched his head a bit, and that was a real problem, because how the hell do you sell luxury apartments without a parking spot? So this entire project has a lot of different components. So, and it is partly architecture. So one of the solutions that we implemented was to actually transform the underground parking to a mobility hub that is shared with all the people living in the building. That's one part. That also means physically altering the design of getting in and out, so user experience. We designed vehicles with a much smaller footprint that would be used at different times through an application, so that's a third part, that you can book ahead and so on. And so it becomes an integral part of living there, gives you access to this type of mobility solutions. Another example, talking about technology, driverless technology, wonderful. But what we tend to forget is that driverless technology is very hard to implement in busy city traffic. So one area where it really excels, for example, is on rail. And on rail, what is the most expensive component? It's the driver and the people that are running the train. So we have been seeing, and also here in Piemonte, for example, train tracks or services gradually closing down. And so it's this negative spiral. So how can you revert this? Well, if you have driverless trains that instead of running one big train every 2 hours, you can have smaller pods going with autonomous technology to offer a much more frequent service, a bit like a metro. Another example, this is a museum. And a lot of people like to go to museums, obviously, but a lot of people also, it's not that they need to have a wheelchair, but maybe they have difficulty standing on their feet for 3 hours in a row. How do you deal with that? So here, work together with a company from Alba to imagine not wheelchairs, but mobile chairs that could assist in those type of situations. And of course, once you do that, you have already the technology on board. So how can we then even augment the experience of the museum itself with extra information or interactive features? Same here. And so now we're really talking about wheelchairs. What is the context here? Also a local startup that was focusing on architectonical barriers for people in wheelchairs. And how do you deal with that? Yes, of course, you can design better wheelchairs, but there are limits to that. Architectonical barriers will keep on existing. And so it was much more focusing on a social application in which different areas between a community or inside a community could be shared, could be commented, could be people could be advised about certain problems and so on. So this is much more about creating a community through a digital layer in solving mobility or part of mobility in such a way. Talking about community, this is an image that in the meantime is quite old, but it doesn't really matter. So what you see here is pods as they have been designed, I think, 15 years ago. But the interesting part is that more and more, even in real life, we see vehicles being used not really to drive around. even in Asia, you see people renting a car at their lunch break to have a quiet lunch break and eat their noodles inside the car in peace. So it becomes a space. But what if the relevance of that space is not inside the vehicle, but outside the vehicle? So with screens on the outside, what if you can rent a vehicle to play a game with some friends on a square? What if you can watch a football game in a public space altogether, and so on and so on. Bridging to where it potentially can lead to, so you understand from all the things that I've been showing you that mobility can be approached over a lot of different angles. And so what you see here is literally the IED students that graduated last summer. They are doing a giga mapping exercise. And we started with a very mundane, a very banal object. And it happened to be, if I remember well, a pack of cigarettes that was lying on the table. And we started from there, and we just expanded, and we continued to expand. And very soon, the wall was not big enough, and we had to make the corner. And then the room, after quite some hours, was completely full with all the potential connections that were linked there, and how we could imagine the mobility that was involved in this package of cigarettes to be. That is social mobility, that is economic mobility, that is mobility of matter, where was it produced, what is the meaning of it, and so on, and so on, and so on. So it really goes beyond. And all of this actually comes together in this second shift in mindset that we want to present to you today. And so this is the very classical approach of what mobility design used to be. There is a user, has a certain desire, let's respond to it, we create a vehicle, let's call it a day. While what we do also in the master program is to see everything in a much broader daylight. There are so many things that come to mind and how we can actually alter mobility in meaningful ways. And even this scheme is relevant, but is absolutely not complete. This is a very small thing of how we can approach mobility. And in essence, talking about urban mobility then, well, basically, still the user is very relevant. We all have smartphones, we all have smart devices. This becomes a part of our daily life that we just can embrace and use to our advantage. Of course, vehicles are involved. Vehicles that, thanks to what I've all just explained, can be a lot of different things, not just cars, bikes, or walking. It all happens in a built area that we not just have to take for granted, that we can also influence on and that we can also design. And of course, it happens within context of a lot of regulations that we can also alter. And so you can act on all these different elements to actually create solutions that truly are meaningful for the people that want to use them. And I think this is a bit of a cryptic synthesis of how we approach this entire thing and how we see mobility happening, or the future of mobility happening. The most relevant part is maybe not in what we tend to look at, but is what is happening in between by overlapping different things, by seeing what is happening in the shades and what start to exist in the background of everything that we already know today. I come back to this because this is, again, the synthesis. Lowie, if you want to take over.
Yeah, to quickly conclude, so as you have seen from Wouter, underlines why it's so important to detach from what we know today, to be able to see the possibilities that also thanks to technology we can generate in the future. And if you go to the next slide here, we want to close with this quote from Rick Rubin, the famous music producer. And it's something which is close to our heart. So he's saying, turning something from an idea into reality can make it seem smaller. You know, it changes from unearthly to earthly. But the imagination has no limits. The physical world does, but the work exists in both. And this is where we believe that true value is created, when we can connect imagination, new ideas, and then thanks also with the use of technology, translate them into something that exists in the real world, meaning where people can really use it, and also, as Wouter said, where the context can benefit from it. Thank you.